All right, so get this. We're diving deep today into some pretty wild predictions about crypto.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. It's about the future of cryptocurrency and like global finance and what it all means for you.
Okay.
Our source material this time is
Hmm.
it's a fascinating YouTube video, and it features Krzysztof Jackowski.
Oh, yeah.
You might have heard of him. He's that self-proclaimed clairvoyant from Poland.
Yes, I've heard of him. He's been making some interesting claims lately,
Yeah.
particularly in relation to Donald Trump's pronouncements about cryptocurrency.
Exactly. Trump, speaking from his own social media platform, of course,
Of course.
declared his intention to create a U.S. national reserve of cryptocurrency.
Wow.
He even said, "This is my executive order,"
Uh-huh.
which makes you think he's pretty serious about this.
It certainly suggests a level of conviction there
Right.
and a belief in his own authority to push this through.
Yeah.
I mean, executive order carries a lot of weight,
Yeah.
especially in the context of financial policy.
And he wasn't vague about which cryptocurrencies he had in mind either.
Oh, really?
Bitcoin was specifically mentioned.
Interesting.
Among others, it seems like he's picking favorites.
Hmm.
But what I found even more interesting was how he framed this whole thing.
Okay.
He called Biden's administration corrupt
Uh-huh.
and positioned this move as a way to make America great again.
Classic.
Classic Trump, right?
Yeah, it's definitely a tactic he's used before,
Yeah.
framing himself as the outsider, fighting against a corrupt establishment.
Exactly.
But in this case, he's linking that narrative to cryptocurrency
Yeah.
and making a pretty bold claim that this will make the USA the capital of the cryptocurrency world.
Huge statement.
It is a huge statement, and
Yeah.
it raises a lot of questions.
A lot of questions. This is where things get complex.
Sure.
Can you walk me through this part?
Sure.
What does it actually mean for the U.S. to become the crypto capital?
Well, to understand that,
Yeah.
you have to consider the current state of global finance. The U.S. dollar has been the dominant reserve currency for decades,
Uh-huh.
but that dominance is not set in stone
Right.
if faith in the dollar erodes
Okay.
and cryptocurrency becomes a more attractive alternative.
Yeah.
Particularly for governments and large institutions, we could see a significant shift in global financial power.
So the U.S. is essentially trying to get ahead of the curve.
You could say that,
Yeah.
to establish itself as the leader in this emerging landscape.
Right.
But it's not just about being a leader, it's about potentially rewriting the rules of the game.
Okay.
If the U.S. can successfully position itself as the crypto capital,
Uh-huh.
it could have a huge influence on how this technology is regulated, adopted, and ultimately used on a global scale.
Right.
And that's where Jackowski's analysis comes in.
Okay, let's talk about Jackowski then.
Okay.
Now, I know the idea of a clairvoyant weighing in on global finance might sound a little out there to some people,
Sure.
but his analysis is actually pretty intriguing.
He predicts that this crisis will be even bigger than the 2008 crisis,
Wow.
and that the U.S. will use cryptocurrency to weather the storm,
Huh.
potentially coming out stronger while other countries struggle.
Yeah, and he claims to have predicted this shift towards cryptocurrency before,
Yeah.
which adds a layer of intrigue to his analysis.
Sure.
What's fascinating here is how he connects Trump's statement to a much broader global trend.
Okay.
He's not just saying that cryptocurrency will become more important.
Right.
He's saying that it will be used as a tool of power, a way for the U.S. to assert its dominance in a changing world order.
And he doesn't stop there.
No.
He goes so far as to suggest that this crisis will be intentionally provoked,
Really?
potentially by manipulating global markets
Right.
and exploiting the inherent volatility of cryptocurrencies.
That's a bold claim.
It is a pretty bold claim.
It is. What he's suggesting is essentially a massive power play by the U.S.
Wow.
Imagine a scenario where traditional markets like stock markets are in free fall.
While the value of cryptocurrencies, held in large part by the U.S. government, remains relatively stable, this could create a power vacuum
Right.
that the U.S. could exploit,
Yeah.
potentially dictating new terms for global trade and finance.
That sounds like it could lead to a very different world order.
It could.
What are some counter-arguments to Jackowski's prediction, though?
Well, for one, the global financial system is incredibly complex.
Yeah.
The idea that one country, even one as powerful as the U.S., could single-handedly orchestrate a crisis of this magnitude and then emerge unscathed is debatable.
Right.
There are so many other players, so many unforeseen variables.
So there's a lot of uncertainty.
Yeah.
But it's a scenario worth considering, right?
Absolutely.
Especially if we want to be prepared for what the future might hold.
Definitely. And this is where Jackowski's use of the term financial Tower of Babel comes in.
Okay, I have to admit that one threw me a little.
Okay.
Can you break that down for me?
Sure. Essentially, he's drawing a parallel between the biblical story of the Tower of Babel, where humanity's ambition to reach heaven leads to chaos and confusion, and the current state of global finance. He believes that the current system built on fiat currencies and centralized institutions is becoming increasingly unstable and unsustainable.
So the financial Tower of Babel is this clash between traditional finance and this emerging world of cryptocurrency.
Exactly. And the result, according to Jackowski, could be a period of profound economic chaos, where the value of tangible assets clashes with the volatile, belief-driven nature of cryptocurrencies.
This idea of a financial Tower of Babel is pretty unsettling. It makes you wonder about the fragility of our current systems, doesn't it?
It certainly does. Jackowski believes this clash could be particularly destabilizing for countries that are heavily reliant on the U.S. for economic and military support. He specifically mentions countries like Lithuania, Latvia, Estonia, and even Poland as potentially being left vulnerable.
And that's where the geopolitical dimension comes in.
Yes.
He suggests that this crisis could lead to the U.S. leaving NATO and forming new alliances, potentially leaving those countries vulnerable to Russian influence.
Yes, he sees this as a potential reshaping of the global order, with the U.S. potentially turning inward and focusing on consolidating its power within a new cryptocurrency-driven system.
Wow, that's a lot to process.
It is.
So we've got a bold statement from Trump, a prediction of a major financial crisis from Jackowski, and the potential for a significant reshaping of the global landscape.
And this is just the beginning.
Okay.
Now that we understand the broader picture, let's explore how these potential shifts could impact you personally.
Right.
Because ultimately, that's what matters most, isn't it?
Absolutely. We're talking about potential global upheaval.
Yeah.
But we can't lose sight of the individual in all of this.
Right.
So how could this impact your portfolio?
Yeah.
Let's consider some scenarios in part 2.
This is where Jackowski's predictions get really interesting, even a little unsettling when you consider the potential impact on your personal finances.
That's a good point. We've been talking about global power plays and potential economic chaos.
Right.
But how might all of this trickle down and affect individuals like you and me?
Let's start with the most obvious implication about your savings and investments.
Great.
If the U.S. really does go all in on cryptocurrency and becomes this crypto capital, as Trump envisions, it could significantly impact the value of the dollar.
That's a concerning prospect, but some economists argue that the dollar's role as a reserve currency is unlikely to change drastically. What's your take on that?
It's true that the dollar has enjoyed a privileged position for decades.
Yeah.
But no currency's dominance is guaranteed. We've seen this throughout history.
Right.
If faith in the dollar erodes and cryptocurrency becomes a more attractive alternative, especially for governments and large institutions, we could see a shift in global financial power.
Right.
And that shift could have very real consequences for your personal finances.
So what would that mean for my savings and my investment?
Well, it's impossible to predict specifics,
Sure.
but it's safe to say there would be a period of volatility and uncertainty. Your existing investments could lose value, and the cost of imported goods could rise as the dollar weakens. Even if you don't hold any cryptocurrency directly, you'd still feel the ripple effects.
So how can people prepare for that kind of volatility? Should they rush out and buy Bitcoin?
Hold on. I'm not giving financial advice here.
Of course, of course.
This is where critical thinking and careful planning come in. It's not about making impulsive moves based on fear or hype.
Right.
Instead, it's about understanding the risks and the potential rewards and making informed decisions about your own financial future.
So education is key. Don't panic, but don't bury your head in the sand either.
Exactly. This is a time to educate yourself about cryptocurrency, understand the underlying technology, and learn about different investment strategies. It's crucial to strategically allocate assets and manage risk, especially in an emerging and volatile market like cryptocurrency.
And diversification is always a good strategy.
Right. Of course.
Don't put all your eggs in one basket, as they say.
Right.
But let's go beyond the financial aspect for a moment. What about the broader societal implications?
Okay.
If Jackowski's vision of this financial Tower of Babel comes true, what would that look like in everyday life?
That's a fascinating question. Imagine a world where the value of everything from your house to a loaf of bread is constantly fluctuating based on the whims of the cryptocurrency market. That's the essence of what Jackowski is predicting, a clash between the tangible and the digital,
Yeah.
between traditional notions of value and this new decentralized system.
It sounds almost dystopian, like something out of a sci-fi movie.
Yeah.
Would this lead to more social unrest?
It's certainly possible. Throughout history, economic instability has often been a catalyst for social and political upheaval. If people feel like the system is rigged against them, like their hard-earned money is losing value overnight,
Right.
it could create fertile ground for unrest.
So we're not just talking about financial chaos. We're talking about potential social and political chaos as well. This is starting to sound like a recipe for disaster.
Well, it's not inevitable,
Okay.
but it's certainly a scenario worth considering. This raises a crucial question.
Okay.
How do we as individuals and as a society prepare for a future that could be radically different from what we're used to? How do we navigate this transition in a way that minimizes harm and maximizes well-being?
That's a big question. Are there any potential upsides to this scenario? Could there be some silver linings to this crypto revolution that Jackowski is describing?
That's an important point. Every major disruption, every technological revolution creates both challenges and opportunities.
Okay.
If cryptocurrency does become more widely adopted, it could potentially lead to greater financial inclusion for those who are currently excluded from traditional banking systems. It could also facilitate faster and cheaper cross-border transactions,
Yeah.
potentially boosting global trade and empowering individuals in ways we haven't even imagined yet.
So it's not all doom and gloom. There could be some positive outcomes as well.
Absolutely. Remember, technology itself is neutral. It's how we choose to use it that determines whether it becomes a force for good or ill.
Okay.
The internet is a great example of this. It can be used to spread knowledge and connect people, but it can also be used for surveillance and manipulation.
It all comes back to individual choice and collective responsibility. It's about being aware of the potential impacts of this technology, both positive and negative,
Right.
and making conscious choices about how we want to shape the future. But let's get back to Jackowski's analysis for a moment.
Okay.
He specifically mentions the U.S. potentially withdrawing from NATO and forming new alliances. What are the implications of that? How might this affect countries like Lithuania, Latvia, Estonia, and Poland, as Jackowski suggests?
This is where the geopolitical dimension becomes particularly worrying. NATO has been a cornerstone of Western security for decades,
Right.
a symbol of collective defense against potential aggressors. If the U.S. were to withdraw, it would create a major power vacuum in Europe and beyond.
And that could embolden adversaries like Russia. Isn't that what Jackowski's suggesting?
Yes. He believes that Russia could see this as an opportunity to expand its sphere of influence, particularly in those countries that have historically been within its orbit.
Okay.
And it's not just about military threats. Russia has a history of using economic and political leverage to exert pressure on its neighbors.
So the U.S. turning inwards and focusing on cryptocurrency could have major consequences for global security as well.
Right.
It's not just about finance, it's about the balance of power on a global scale.
Precisely. And that's why this whole scenario, whether Jackowski's predictions come true exactly as he describes or not, is so important to consider. It highlights the interconnectedness of seemingly disparate issues: finance, technology, geopolitics, and even individual choice.
Okay, so we've covered the potential impacts on personal finances, society, and the global landscape. It's a lot to take in, but Jackowski's analysis goes even deeper than this. He also talks about the spiritual implications of this potential shift towards a cryptocurrency-dominated world.
Yes, he sees this as more than just a technological or economic shift. He sees it as a potential shift in consciousness, a shift in how we relate to value, wealth, and even reality itself.
Okay, now that's intriguing. We've talked about the practical and the geopolitical.
Right.
But how does cryptocurrency tie into spirituality? What could that possibly mean for you and me? Let's dive into that in part 3. Okay, so we've talked about the potential economic and geopolitical upheavals that could come with a cryptocurrency-driven world.
Right.
But Jackowski doesn't stop there.
No.
He takes his analysis even a step further and suggests that there are spiritual implications to all of this.
Sure.
I have to admit, I'm really curious to hear more about this.
Yeah, this is where Jackowski's perspective gets really interesting.
Yeah.
Even if you're not particularly spiritually inclined, he sees this potential shift towards cryptocurrency as part of a larger transformation in human consciousness.
Okay.
You know, how we relate to value, to wealth, and even to reality itself.
Okay, so how does cryptocurrency tie into spirituality? What's the connection?
Well, consider the nature of cryptocurrency itself.
Okay.
It's decentralized, existing outside the control of traditional institutions like governments and banks.
Sure.
Its value is largely determined by belief,
Oh,
the
yeah.
collective faith of those who use it.
So it's like a rejection of the old systems.
You could see it that way.
Yeah.
And a leap of faith into something new,
Okay.
something more aligned with individual freedom and autonomy.
So it's not just about getting rich quick.
Right.
It's about creating a new paradigm, a new way of being in the world.
Exactly. It's about shifting away from centralized control
Okay.
and placing more power in the hands of individuals.
Mm.
However, Jackowski also warns about the potential for manipulation and control, even within the decentralized world of cryptocurrency. He cautions that those who control the algorithms, the underlying technology, could still exert a great deal of power, maybe even more subtly and insidiously than traditional institutions.
So it's like a double-edged sword.
Yeah,
It could be a tool for liberation, but it could also be a tool for even greater control if it falls into the wrong hands.
precisely. That's why discernment is so important.
Yeah.
We need to be aware of both the potential benefits and the potential risks of this technology.
Right.
We need to ask ourselves, who's behind it? What are their motivations? How can we ensure that it's used in a way that benefits humanity as a whole rather than just a select few?
Those are crucial questions, and regardless of whether you're talking about technology, finance, or even spiritual movements. It's about being aware of the potential for both good and bad,
Right.
and making conscious choices about how we want to participate.
And that's where the spiritual dimension really comes into play. It's not just about the technology itself. It's about our consciousness, our values, and our intentions. If we approach this technology with greed, fear, or a desire for control, it's likely to lead to negative outcomes. But if we approach it with wisdom, compassion, and a genuine desire to create a better world, it could be a powerful force for good.
So it's not just about what cryptocurrency does to us, but what we do with it.
Right.
It becomes a mirror reflecting our own consciousness, our own evolution as a species. That's a pretty profound insight, even if you don't subscribe to Jackowski's clairvoyant claims. This whole scenario,
Yeah.
whether it plays out exactly as he predicts or not,
Right.
forces us to confront some fundamental questions about who we are, what we value, and what kind of world we want to create for ourselves and future generations.
I think that's the most important takeaway from all of this. We are living in a time of accelerating change
Yeah.
and increasing uncertainty. The old rules of the game may no longer apply, and the future is more uncertain than ever. This is not a time to bury our heads in the sand. It's a time to be informed, to be engaged, and to be adaptable. Most importantly, it's a time to be mindful of the choices we make, both individually and collectively, because those choices will shape the world we inhabit.
Well said. So even in the face of potential global upheaval, even in a world where the very nature of value and wealth seems to be shifting, we still have agency. We still have the power to choose our own path.
Exactly. And that's a powerful reminder, a reminder that even in the midst of uncertainty and change, hope remains. And the choices we make today will determine whether that hope blossoms into a brighter future or withers in the face of fear and greed.
That brings us to the end of our deep dive into this fascinating world of Trump cryptocurrency and the intriguing predictions of Krzysztof Jackowski.
Right.
We've covered a lot of ground, from the practical to the philosophical, from the financial to the spiritual. We hope this has sparked your curiosity, expanded your understanding, and maybe even challenged your assumptions. If Jackowski's vision of a crypto-driven world is even partially accurate, it begs the question, how can you prepare not just financially, but also ethically and philosophically for a future where the very definition of value might be transformed? That's something for you to consider. Till next time, keep diving deep and keep seeking truth wherever it may lead you.